My husband's family tried to sabotage my business and my reputation, but I turned the tables. I never thought my life would turn into a daytime drama, but here we are. This is a long one, so grab a snack. My husband, Mark, and I have been married for 5 wonderful years, together for 7. We have a beautiful 2-year-old daughter, Lily, who is the light of our lives. Mark is incredible, supportive, loving, and my best friend. The problem isn't with him, it's with his family, particularly his mother, Susan, and his sister, Brenda. From day one, they've been difficult. When Mark and I started dating, I was a budding entrepreneur. I'd always had a passion for baking and had started a small online business selling custom cakes and pastries. It was slow going at first, but I was building a loyal customer base. Mark was always my biggest cheerleader, helping me with deliveries and taste testing new recipes. His family, however, saw it as a hobby, a cute little distraction before I settled down into a proper career. Susan, a retired school administrator, often made comments about how I should consider something more stable, like teaching. Brenda, who works in marketing, would subtly criticize my branding or suggest I focus on more marketable items, usually things she personally liked. I brushed it off, attributing it to their well-meaning but slightly misguided concern. Things escalated when Mark and I got engaged. Susan immediately started planning our wedding, despite my polite attempts to express my own preferences. She envisioned a grand, traditional affair with all her friends and acquaintances, while I wanted something more intimate and personal. This was our first major clash. Mark, bless his heart, tried to mediate, but Susan had a way of making him feel guilty, implying I was being ungrateful. Eventually, we compromised, leaning more towards her vision than mine, just to keep the peace. The wedding itself was beautiful, but I felt like a guest at my own event. During the reception, Brenda made a snide comment about my wedding cake, which I had personally designed and baked a small portion of as a symbolic gesture. She said, "Oh, it's rustic. Very you, I suppose, trying to keep up with your little baking business." Mark overheard it and gave her a stern look, but I just smiled and changed the subject. After we got married, my business started to really take off. Word of mouth was spreading, and I was getting more orders than I could handle alone. I hired a part-time assistant, moved my operation out of our small apartment kitchen into a dedicated commercial space, and even started getting inquiries from local cafes. I was thrilled. This wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a legitimate, growing enterprise. Mark was incredibly proud, always telling anyone who would listen about my achievements. His family, however, seemed to view my success with a mix of skepticism and resentment. Susan started making passive-aggressive remarks about how much time I was spending at work, implying I was neglecting Mark. This was baffling, as Mark and I had a great system for managing our schedules and always made time for each other. Brenda, ever the marketing expert, would offer unsolicited advice, often contradicting my established strategies or suggesting I completely rebrand to something she thought was trendier. When I politely declined her suggestions, explaining my current approach was working, she'd get huffy and accuse me of being unopen to constructive criticism. The birth of our daughter, Lily, brought a brief reprieve, as their focus shifted to being doting grandparents or aunt. But even then, there were underlying tensions. Susan often implied I should scale back my business to be a full-time mother, despite the fact that I had a fantastic nanny and a flexible work schedule that allowed me to spend ample time with Lily. She'd say things like, "It's such a shame Lily won't have her mother around as much during these crucial years," or some mothers choose to prioritize their children over their careers. Mark would always jump to my defense, explaining how well we were managing, but it felt like a constant battle. The real trouble started about a year ago. My business had expanded significantly. I had secured a contract with a popular local grocery chain to supply them with a selection of my pastries, and I was on the verge of opening my first brick-and-mortar bakery and cafe. It was a dream come true, years of hard work finally paying off. I was bursting with excitement and shared the news with Mark and, reluctantly, with his family. Mark was ecstatic. His parents and Brenda, however, had a lukewarm reaction. Susan congratulated me with a tight smile, while Brenda just said, "Oh, that's ambitious. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of commitment?" A few weeks later, strange things began to happen. My online reviews, which had always been overwhelmingly positive, started to show a sudden influx of negative comments. These weren't just general complaints, they were specific, detailed criticisms about things that weren't true, accusations of using subpar ingredients, poor hygiene in my kitchen, and even claims that my pastries tasted stale and mass-produced. My loyal customers were confused, and I was distraught. I prided myself on the quality and freshness of my products, and these accusations were completely baseless. Then, a few of my wholesale clients, including the grocery chain I had just signed with, started calling me with concerns. They had received anonymous emails and even physical letters containing similar defamatory claims about my business. One client, a small independent coffee shop that had been with me from the beginning, tearfully informed me they had to temporarily suspend their orders due to the negative press and customer inquiries. My business, which had been flourishing, was suddenly taking a nosedive that I was devastated and completely bewildered. Who would do this? And why? Mark was furious. He spent hours with me, trying to trace the source of the negative reviews and emails. We reported the malicious reviews to the platforms, but the damage was being done. One evening, while Mark was at his weekly poker game, I was scrolling through social media, feeling utterly defeated. I stumbled upon a local community group on Facebook, and my heart sank. There, in a thread discussing local businesses, was a series of posts from an anonymous account, reiterating all the false accusations against my bakery. But what truly caught my eye were the comments. Brenda had liked several of these negative posts, and in one exchange, she had even commented, "It's a shame when small businesses cut corners. Quality really suffers." My blood ran cold. It was circumstantial, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. I immediately called Mark, my voice trembling as I explained what I had found. Mark was silent for a long moment, then said, "I'll talk to her. This is unacceptable." The next day, Mark confronted Brenda. He called her and asked her directly if she knew anything about the smear campaign. Brenda feigned ignorance, claiming she just liked posts she agreed with and that she had heard rumors about my business, implying they were true. Mark, knowing her well, pressed her further. He reminded her of all the unsolicited advice she had given me, her dismissive attitude towards my success. Brenda, cornered, eventually cracked. She admitted to posting some of the negative comments herself and to encouraging a few friends to do the same, but she insisted she wasn't the main culprit, just someone who wanted to help her sister-in-law see the truth about her failing business model. She then dropped a bombshell. She said, "Mom knows. She helped me. She thought it would make you see sense and go back to being a proper mother and wife, instead of chasing this silly dream." I was in shock. Susan, my mother-in-law, who outwardly projected an image of a caring, if somewhat overbearing, matriarch, was actively trying to destroy my livelihood? It was a betrayal so profound it made me feel physically ill. When Mark confronted Susan, she was initially defensive, then tearful, claiming she only had my best interests at heart. "I just wanted you to be happy, dear," she said. "And this business, it's taking you away from Mark and Lily. A woman's place is with her family, not in a hot kitchen all day." Her twisted logic was infuriating. She genuinely believed she was doing me a favor by attempting to dismantle my career. Brenda, emboldened by her mother's confession, continued to justify her actions, stating she thought I was getting too big for my britches. Mark was incandescent with rage. He told them both that their actions were malicious, damaging, and completely unacceptable. He informed them that I was considering legal action and that their behavior had severely damaged our relationship. He made it clear that until they genuinely apologized and understood the gravity of their actions, he would be limiting contact with them. The apologies, when they eventually came, were weak and self-serving. Susan cried about how misunderstood she was, and Brenda tried to deflect blame, saying she was just following Mom's lead. It was clear they didn't truly grasp the impact of what they had done. My business was still struggling, my reputation was tarnished, and I was emotionally drained that I knew I couldn't let this stand. Not only for my business, but for my own sense of dignity and for Lily, so she could see her mother stand up for herself. I decided to fight back, but not in the way they expected. I wasn't going to engage in a public mudslinging contest. I was going to use their tactics against them, but with undeniable proof that I spent weeks meticulously gathering evidence. I compiled all the negative reviews, the anonymous emails, and the social media comments. I had screenshots of Brenda's likes and comments. I even managed to trace some of the anonymous emails back to IP addresses linked to Susan's and Brenda's homes, thanks to a tech-savvy friend. It was a painstaking process, but I was determined. Once I had everything, I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer. He was appalled by the extent of the sabotage. He advised me that while a full-blown lawsuit would be costly and emotionally taxing, I had more than enough evidence to pursue a cease and desist order and possibly seek damages for defamation and interference with business relations. However, I had a different idea. I didn't want a long, drawn-out legal battle that would inevitably become public and cause even more stress. I wanted to expose them, but in a way that would protect my business and my family. I drafted a comprehensive letter, outlining all the evidence I had gathered, detailing the financial and reputational damage their actions had caused. I included screenshots, IP address logs, and even a recording of Mark's conversation with Brenda where she admitted to her involvement. I then sent this letter, not just to Susan and Brenda, but also to other key members of Mark's extended family, aunts, uncles, and cousins who held significant respect within the family unit. I also sent a copy to the managing partners of the local grocery chain and the owners of the coffee shop that had temporarily suspended their orders. The letter was carefully worded, factual, and devoid of emotional rhetoric. It simply laid out the truth of what they had done. I ended the letter by stating that while I was prepared to pursue legal action, I was offering them a chance to rectify the situation by publicly retracting their false statements, issuing sincere apologies to me and my business partners, and ceasing all further attempts to interfere with my business. I also included a clause stating that if they failed to comply, I would not hesitate to proceed with legal action, and that all the gathered evidence would be made public. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Mark's extended family was horrified. They had always held Susan and Brenda in high regard, seeing them as pillars of the community. To discover they were behind such a malicious campaign was a shock. The grocery chain and coffee shop, after reviewing the evidence, were incredibly supportive. They reinstated my contracts and even offered to issue public statements of support for my business. Susan and Brenda were completely blindsided. They had underestimated my resolve and my ability to gather evidence. They had also clearly not anticipated the swift and condemning reaction from their own family. Their carefully cultivated image of respectability was shattered. Faced with the undeniable evidence and the threat of public exposure and legal action, they finally capitulated. It wasn't pretty. There were more tears, more attempts at self-pity, but this time, there was genuine fear in their eyes. They issued public apologies on social media, retracting all their false statements. They also sent private, albeit still somewhat grudging, apologies to me and to the affected businesses. The public apologies, combined with the support from my clients and the outpouring of goodwill from my loyal customers who had been patiently waiting for me to clear my name, helped my business recover remarkably quickly. In fact, the whole ordeal, once the truth came out, generated a surprising amount of positive publicity. People rallied around me, admiring my resilience and determination. My sales actually surged, and my bakery and cafe opened to a flood of supportive customers. The relationship with Susan and Brenda, predictably, is fractured beyond repair. Mark has maintained minimal contact, primarily for the sake of Lily, but he has made it clear to them that their actions were unforgivable. I have no contact with them whatsoever. It's a sad outcome, but I couldn't allow their toxic jealousy and misplaced sense of control to destroy everything I had worked so hard for. This whole experience taught me invaluable lessons about standing up for myself, trusting my instincts, and the importance of having a supportive partner. It was a dark chapter, but I emerged stronger, with my business thriving, my reputation intact, and my family unit more united than ever. Sometimes, the drama in your life can actually lead to your greatest triumphs. And sometimes, the most unexpected enemies are found within your own family.